2 days before we were set to tie the knot, she went out on a date with another guy. So, I decided to walk away from her at the altar. Just 48 hours before our big day, a text flipped my world upside down. It was a normal afternoon, nothing out of the ordinary. I was knee-deep in last-minute wedding prep, double-checking the seating chart, calling the venue to make sure everything was on track, and firing off replies to a barrage of texts from hyped-up relatives. Everything was rolling along smoothly. Her dress was ready at the shop. The ring sparkled, fresh from a polish. I'd even put the final touches on my vows. We were good to go, or at least, that's what I thought. Then my phone pinged with a message that stopped me cold. No name, no, "Hey, how's it going," just a single picture. It was her, sitting at a little outdoor cafe, giggling, leaning way too close to some guy who sure as hell wasn't me. His hand was resting on the table, inches from hers, and the look on her face, it wasn't just casual chit-chat. A second text came through, "Not my place to stir things up, but you deserve to know what your fiancé's up to while you're sorting out wedding plans." I sat there, staring at that photo for what felt like forever. There was no mistaking it, no way to brush it off with some flimsy excuse. I knew that cafe, it was just a few blocks from our place, not exactly the spot you hit for a work meeting or a quick catch-up with a buddy. And she'd told me she was out shopping with her sister that day. I didn't shoot back a reply. I didn't pick up the phone to call her. I didn't even drop a hint that I knew. Instead, I just let it sink in. I sat there, turning it over in my mind, keeping my cool. I wanted to be pissed. I wanted to feel like she'd stabbed me in the back, but all I felt was this eerie, icy calm. That night, when she waltzed through the door, I played it off like nothing was wrong. She flashed a big smile, gave me a quick peck on the cheek, and started rambling about her trip to the nail salon, agonizing over which shade of nude polish would look best for the ceremony. I just nodded, grinned, and told her to pick the one she loved. She had no clue I was onto her. The next day was the rehearsal, and both our families showed up, all laughs and good vibes as we ran through the plan. I stood at the head of the aisle, shaking hands with her dad, getting playful slaps on the back from my groomsmen, and posing for photos. She was right there next to me, squeezing my hand, acting like everything was perfect. I went along with it. Somewhere deep down, though, a switch had flipped. She probably thought she'd pulled it off, that her little coffee date was no big deal, maybe just a harmless flirt, one last ego boost before tying the knot. But that's not the kind of woman I wanted to build a life with. After the rehearsal, when everyone had cleared out and the venue was still, I hung back. I wandered through the empty space, picturing it packed with guests, flowers everywhere, music filling the air. I imagined her gliding down the aisle in her white dress, the promises we'd make, the life we'd start together, and I knew I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't hitch myself to someone who was already sneaking around. I didn't sleep a wink that night. No tears, no big dramatic outburst, no rehearsed speech to lay into her. I just made up my mind. I'd walk away, not in some heated fight or quiet breakup, but right there at the altar, where it had hit her pride the hardest. Let her face the crowd and explain why the guy she was supposed to marry turned his back and left. She made her choice 2 days before our wedding, and now it was my turn to make mine. The wedding morning rolled in, and everything clicked into place like a well-oiled machine. The sky was clear, not a cloud in sight, as the sun came up. The florists showed up right on schedule, and the venue crew was already buzzing around when I pulled into the parking lot. It looked like a dream. Every little detail she'd spent months fussing over had fallen perfectly into place. White chairs were lined up neatly along the grassy aisle, the arch was covered in fresh roses, and soft classical tunes drifted from the speakers in the background. Everyone around me was beaming, practically buzzing with excitement. Her bridesmaids were chuckling as they brushed past me, heading to the dressing suite, while guests started filing in, all decked out in their Sunday best, toting gift bags and flashing big grins. To anyone watching, it seemed like the happiest day of our lives was coming together just as we dreamed. But me? I'd never been more sure of myself. No nerves were rattling me. No second thoughts were tugging at my heart. I didn't even feel that pang of guilt you'd think might hit a guy about to pull off what I had in mind. Because I wasn't the one who'd shattered this thing. I wasn't the one who'd spun a web of lies. I went through every step like a man on a mission. I slapped hands with my groomsmen, cracking a smile or two. I posed for the pre-ceremony snapshots, capturing the moment for the album. I wrapped my mom in a big hug and gave my dad a nod for always being my rock, steady and quiet. I even tossed a light-hearted jab at the officiant, asking if he'd memorized his lines or was just winging it. Nobody had a clue anything was off, and that's exactly how I planned it. When I slipped into the groom's room to throw on my tux, I stood there, staring at myself in the mirror for a good long while. There I was, tie perfectly knotted, boutonniere pinned just right, shoes polished to a shine. I looked every bit the part of a groom, ready to say, I do. But the guy staring back at me? He'd already come to terms with the fact that the future he'd been building had collapsed before it could even start. A couple of knocks hit the door. Time to get moving. The processional music kicked up, soft and elegant. One by one, the bridesmaids glided down the aisle, rocking their pastel dresses, each clutching a dainty bouquet. Then came the flower girl, scattering petals, followed by the ring bearer, proud as could be. A quiet buzz of excitement swept through the crowd as everyone rose to their feet, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of her stepping into view at the end of the aisle. I won't sugarcoat it, she looked stunning. She was every inch the fairy tale bride. Her hair was swept up in soft curls, her veil drifting behind her like a cloud, her smile polished and practiced. She gripped her bouquet with a hint of jitters, her eyes locked on mine like I was the only thing in her world. Watching her glide toward me felt like some kind of out-of-body experience, each step ticking down to a moment she didn't even see coming. I could feel the crowd's eyes on me. Some folks were already dabbing at tears, caught up in the romance of it all. Others just beamed, oblivious to the fact that the guy at the altar was about to flip the script on this whole day. She finally made it to my side, and the officiant kicked things off with a warm welcome, tossing out words about love, togetherness, and lifelong promises. I barely heard him, my gaze fixed straight ahead, biding my time. Then the moment arrived. Do you, the officiant said, turning to me, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? This was it. I looked at her, really looked at her. In that split second, it all came rushing back, the betrayal, the choice she'd made 2 days before to sit at that cafe, laughing with another guy, acting like she hadn't already given her word to me. I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched out, longer than it should have. Whispers started rippling through the guests. A wave of unease rolled over the crowd. She leaned in just a bit, her smile starting to crack. Babe, she murmured, a spark of fear creeping into her voice. That's when I found my voice. No, I said, clear as day. The officiant did a double take, like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. She just stared, completely still. I'm not doing this, I went on, my tone calm but firm. I can't marry someone who was out on a date with another man 2 days ago. The crowd gasped like they'd been hit by a shockwave. Someone's program hit the floor with a flutter. A chair creaked as someone shifted in their seat. Her eyes went wide, and she started shaking her head, like she could wish this moment away. What are you saying? She whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. I saw the pictures, I said, my voice steady. You were sitting there with him, acting like it was no big deal. You shared laughs with him. You fed me a lie, thinking I'd never catch on. You stood up here, playing the part of a woman ready to commit to me, but you'd already picked someone else before we even got to this moment. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Then the murmurs started creeping through the crowd. Guests turned to each other, some wide-eyed with shock, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Her parents stood frozen, staring at me like I'd just torched the whole ceremony. She took a small step toward me, her voice shaky. "Please, can we just talk this out?" But I backed away. There's nothing left to say. I'm not building a life on a foundation of lies. With that, I turned and walked off, not in a huff, not with some big dramatic flair, just a calm, deliberate stride away from a future I was done chasing. Let her deal with the guests and unravel the mess she'd made. I was through being tangled up in it. I pushed through the ceremony hall's heavy doors, and they swung shut behind me with a thud, like the final period at the end of a story I was ready to close. The air outside felt different. It wasn't just the cool breeze, it was crisp, almost purifying, like the second I left that altar, I'd also stepped out of a lie I hadn't even known I was living. My heart was racing, but not because I regretted a thing. It was the rush of adrenaline, the taste of freedom, the weight of relief washing over me. Behind me, I could hear the chaos kicking off, guests whispering, a few gasps, some voices getting louder. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see it. That moment belonged to her now, not me. I'd said my piece. I hadn't lined up a getaway car or planned some movie-style exit. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket, over and over, but I left it alone. I knew who was blowing it up, and I wasn't ready to hear her voice. About a block from the venue, I found a quiet little park with a stone bench nestled between some trees and a trickling fountain. The city noise felt far away there, like this spot was untouched by the storm I'd just walked out of. I sat down, still in my tux, tie loosened, jacket unbuttoned, feeling like a guy who'd just dodged a lifelong trap. As the minutes ticked by, my phone's buzzing started to taper off. The calls died down. Texts kept pinging, but I didn't check them. I wasn't ready to wade through her apologies, her denials, or whatever polished excuse she'd come up with. None of it would change a thing, because what she did wasn't just a slip-up. It was a deliberate choice. A few hours later, I finally headed home. I peeled off my tux, took a long, hot shower, and plopped down in the living room as the daylight faded outside. I didn't flip on the TV or scroll through social media. I just sat there, letting it all sink in. Later that night, messages started rolling in from mutual friends. "Man, what went down? She's saying you lost it out there. Everyone's freaking out. Is this for real?" Then came the ones taking her side. "She messed up once. Couldn't you have settled it quietly? You humiliated her in front of everybody. Was walking out like that really the right call?" The answers were clear in my head. Yeah, it was real. Yeah, I did the right thing. I didn't bother responding. I didn't owe anybody an explanation. I didn't humiliate her. She did that to herself the moment she chose to sit across from another guy just days before our wedding. Making my exit in front of everyone wasn't about revenge. It was about laying the truth bare, plain and undeniable for all to see. The day after, she showed up at my place. I peeked through the peephole and saw her standing there, dressed down in jeans and a hoodie, her face bare, eyes puffy and red from crying. I didn't crack the door open. She knocked, her voice soft and pleading. "Please, just let me talk to you," she said. Another knock. I screwed up, okay. It was nothing. I got cold feet. I was just tying up loose ends. I was dumb. I didn't think it'd be a big deal. That line, "didn't think it'd be a big deal," kept looping in my head. If it was no big deal, why sneak around? Why lie to my face? Why sit there at the rehearsal dinner, holding my hand, grinning at my folks like our world was picture perfect? I stood there, fingers gripping the doorknob, hearing her voice tremble and shatter. But I didn't budge, because I'm not the guy who gets burned and then doles out forgiveness like it's free just because someone's sobbing hard enough. Eventually, she gave up and left, but not without making noise. She took to social media, posting pictures and stories with carefully crafted captions about how I'd blindsided her, ditched her, and left her clueless about what she'd done wrong. The comments poured in, friends rushing to her defense, acquaintances offering hugs and sympathy, some even coming straight for me with venom. That's when it hit me, she wasn't sorry. She was just pissed she got caught, upset her perfect image had taken a hit, heartbroken that the fairy tale story she'd sold to everyone had crumbled in front of an audience. So, I did something she never saw coming. I laid the truth bare. I shared the photo I'd been sent, the one of her at that cafe, laughing with some guy who wasn't me. No caption, no accusations, just the raw image. The response was immediate. People started backpedaling. My phone lit up with messages, "Man, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. She said you were making it all up. I feel awful." She'd played everyone like a fiddle. Still, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't crow about it. I didn't sling mud. I let the truth do the talking. That night, she sent one last message, "I never thought you'd actually walk away from me." It was the most honest thing she'd said through this whole mess. And it was dead on, because the guy she thought she knew, the one who always gave second chances, who buried his doubts, who grinned through the warning signs, he was gone. The guy standing in his place. He wasn't falling for it anymore. The days after that felt weird, not calm, but more like standing in the wreckage after a bomb's gone off, windows shattered, walls busted, dust still hanging in the air. The shock had worn off, but the fallout was everywhere. My phone wouldn't quit buzzing. People were fishing for the full scoop, dying to hear the juicy details, but I wasn't about to feed their gossip mill just because they were bored or wanted to turn my life into some daytime drama. I'd already lived through enough of that to last me forever. Of course, she didn't go quiet. She kept posting. First, it was sappy quotes about heartbreak and healing, then vague stories hinting at betrayal and misunderstandings. She was clearly trying to spin the story, painting herself as the victim of my overblown reaction. I saw right through it, but online, opinions were split. Some folks still had her back, eating up her glossy photos and poetic captions. Others had seen the proof I'd dropped and quietly unfollowed her, deleted their supportive comments, or just stayed clear of the whole thing. I didn't engage with any of it. I didn't need to. There's a kind of strength in staying silent when you know you're standing on solid truth. What really got under my skin, though, wasn't the social media circus. It was the real talks, the ones with people who actually mattered to me. The next weekend, my mom pulled me aside. She'd been in my corner, but I could tell she was worried I was bottling things up too tight. "You were ready to start a life with her," she said softly, her voice full of care. "You don't just walk away from that without it leaving a mark." I looked at her and set her straight. "I didn't walk away from a life," I told her. "I walked away from a lie." She gave a slow nod, like she was starting to understand. "It still stings," I admitted. Not because I was pining for her, but because I was kicking myself for who I'd almost turned into. I'd been ready to brush off warning signs, make excuses for her behavior, and ignore my gut just to hold together something that was already crumbling under the surface. That's what cut the deepest. But then something else started to happen. Folks I hadn't talked to in ages began reaching out, not to pry or point fingers, but to share their own raw, hushed stories. A buddy from an old job hit me up, "Dude, that post of yours shook me. My fiancée cheated a month before our wedding, and I went through with it. 5 years later, it's been nothing but misery. Wish I'd had your backbone." A cousin I rarely connected with called out of the blue, "You've got no idea how many of us look up to you for what you did." Most wouldn't have had the nerve. Even her old roommate, someone I thought liked me but always kept her distance, sent a late-night message, "She's always pulled stuff like that. You didn't deserve to be on the receiving end." The truth spread in ways I hadn't seen coming. People weren't just noticing my choice, they were taking lessons from it. That realization patched me up more than anything else could. I started turning my focus back to me, hitting the gym with more fire, picking up hobbies I'd shelved during the engagement, and catching up with friends I'd let slip through the cracks for months. It felt like I was piecing myself back together, not in a rush to fill the hole she left, but carefully clearing the debris and setting a sturdier foundation. Then, about 2 weeks after the wedding that never happened, I bumped into someone at a bookstore, of all places, a quiet nook with sparsely stocked shelves and soft jazz humming from overhead speakers. She was a friend of a friend I'd met maybe once or twice before, never more than a quick smile in passing. Standing there by the coffee table books, she glanced up and gave me that same warm smile. "Hey," she said, "I heard about what went down at the wedding." I braced for the usual questions, but she didn't dig for dirt. She didn't push. She just said, "That took some serious guts." We chatted for a bit, about books, jobs, random stuff, steering clear of the mess I'd just climbed out of. For whatever reason, it felt like the most genuine, human moment I'd had in weeks. No pressure, no baggage, no forced grins. As we went our separate ways, she tossed out, "If you ever want to chat with someone who's not fishing for the latest gossip, I'd be up for it." That was it, no strings, just an invitation. Walking home that night, it hit me. I'd walked away from the wrong person in front of everyone at the worst possible time, and somehow, that had cracked open the door for everything else to fall into place. Because starting fresh doesn't kick off when you meet someone new, it begins the second you decide you're worth more. The weeks rolled on, and life didn't just snap back to how it was. It morphed into something completely new. My days weren't eaten up by wedding plans, juggling family gatherings, or trying to read between the lines of someone else's mood swings. For the first time in what felt like ages, I had quiet, room to breathe without bracing for the next apology, the next excuse, or the next lie dressed up with a dazzling smile. In that stillness, I started rediscovering who I was when I wasn't bending over backward to make a broken thing look whole. I started hanging out more with the people who didn't just show up for the good times, friends who stuck around not just through the chaos, but in the calm that came after. We'd go hiking, crack open some beers, jam out to music until the early hours. No one asked me to relive the whole ordeal. No one prodded for the gritty details. They just let me be a guy who'd made a tough call and was finding his footing again. That, more than anything, helped me mend that I kept crossing paths with that woman from the bookstore. At first, it was pure chance, same friend groups, same favorite spots around town. Then it turned into something we both leaned into. She'd shoot me a text about a book she thought I'd dig or a movie she figured was up my alley. I'd ask her to tag along to low-key hangouts where we could chat without any pressure. We never slapped a label on whatever was brewing between us. It was just easy, natural, honest. After the mess I just waded through, honest was more than enough. Meanwhile, the buzz from the wedding fiasco started to die down. Her social media posts trickled to a stop. Her friends, the ones who'd fired off snarky messages at me, went radio silent. Word got around that she'd jetted off on a long trip with some buddies, maybe to clear her head or find herself, though from what I heard, it was mostly about clawing back the social cred she thought she'd lost. I didn't wish her bad times. I didn't wish her good ones, either. I just didn't care anymore. She was a chapter in a book I'd firmly shut, though the sense of closure came in slow, rolling waves. One day, a letter showed up in my mailbox, no sender's address, no name, just my name scrawled neatly on the envelope. I almost chucked it in the trash, but something nagged at me to open it. Inside was a handwritten note from her. No begging, no excuses, no attempt to justify herself. She just laid it all bare. She admitted she didn't fully understand why she'd done what she did, that she'd felt scared, cornered, not by me, but by the parts of herself she hadn't faced. She confessed she'd never sorted through her past, those lingering feelings she thought she'd buried, and that coffee date was a reckless grab for control, a way to prove to herself she still had other paths. Then she wrote something that stuck with me: "You didn't abandon me at the altar. I walked away from you long before that, and you were just the only one with the guts to say it out loud." It wasn't really an apology, but it was the most truthful thing she'd ever said. And somehow, that felt like enough. I folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer, not to hold onto it like some keepsake, but as a marker, a tangible reminder that I hadn't been imagining things, that what I'd sensed and acted on was real, even if she couldn't own it in the heat of the moment. A few months later, I went to a buddy's wedding as a guest. A college friend was tying the knot with his longtime girlfriend, and the whole thing was simple, heartfelt, no flash, no egos, just two people head over heels for each other, making it official. I hung out near the back during the ceremony, watching them swap vows under a gentle evening sky. I didn't feel a trace of resentment. No envy, no regrets. Just a quiet calm, because I knew that when my time came again, whenever that might be, I'd step into it with my eyes wide open. I wouldn't ignore my instincts. I wouldn't hush my inner voice just to keep things smooth. I'd pick someone who picked me, fully, no second guessing. And just as crucial, I'd keep picking myself, too. That night, while the newlyweds shared their first dance, I slipped outside for some fresh air. A minute later, the bookstore woman joined me, handing me a drink and standing there quietly by my side. After a long silence, she spoke up. "Think you'll ever give it another shot?" she asked. I glanced at the stars, then at her. "Yeah," I said. "But next time, I'm doing it my way." She gave a small nod. "Good. The right one won't leave you wondering if you're enough." And just like that, it clicked. I wasn't hitting the reset button. I was moving ahead, eyes clear and heart steady.